April's over, but we're not on to May just yet. I saw 12 new movies this month, so let's rank them. What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. Civil War, Challengers, Monkey Man, Kong in March, Monkey Man in April, Planet of the Apes in May.
That's a lot of monkeys.
Today we're talking all 12 of those movies, then we're going to rank them. Let me know in the comments down below, is there one that I missed? What was your favorite of the month? Do you like this series? Should I keep it going? Drop that like if you think so. We're going to start with a movie that I did not review on this channel. That is The First Omen.
You don't have to be afraid.
Yet another film about a young nun mom. And while this film didn't have one scene as terrifying as Immaculate did, I think as a whole, it's better quality. I did not expect this to be good at all, because we often get films like this, whether it be a sequel, a prequel, another entry in a franchise, or even the original movies as of late set in this time period. They just haven't hit me because oftentimes the pacing gets the best of it, or I just don't care about the plot. But the original Omen is absolutely terrifying. It makes for an interesting concept that you can create spin-offs for and sequels for that we have seen, but this being a prequel and being able to make those ties in your head as we're going, but really just focusing on the story at hand of this young girl who realizes things are not as they seem in this what starts out as a beautiful place with wonderful people until someone sets themselves on fire, and then it all just goes to shit.
Watch your profanity.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, as is this entire film. Nell Tiger-Free is really good in the lead role. Ralph Ineson always brings that gravitas to a role like this, but really, you have an origin story of sorts, one that goes in a fascinating yet familiar direction. I felt the genre cliches, but they did a nice job of treading around what could have felt so familiar to make it way more interesting and way more scary than I expected it to be. Now, does it end kind of like an Avengers movie? Austin, what do you mean by that? You'll have to watch the film, sure. But at the end of the day, I actually had a good time here. And I'm going to go The First Omen on the good tier. Never expected that. How about hundreds of beavers? Austin, what on God's green earth is this? Well, I had a lot of people recommend. It finally came to VOD, and I was able to check it out. This is a Looney Tunes Saturday morning cartoon in live action, made in the most creative, distinct, and different way I have ever seen, in a film that just took advantage of such original cinematic language and gave us a slapstick comedy like the 1930s and 40s films of old, but with a modern touch to it. Now, if you're watching this and you're looking for something a little more serious, I hate to say it, you're not going to find it, because this isn't that. Again, have you ever seen Looney Tunes? That's what this is. But the creativity, I didn't even look at what the budget was, but what these guys are able to do with these moving backgrounds, these guys dressed in mascot suits, like straight out of a college football game, I kid you not. But it's such a low budget looking and feeling movie. That's not a negative. They utilize that to make it feel so different from the rest of everything you're going to see in 2024, and it's funny. It's really funny. If you like that type of humor and a guy just getting himself into shenanigan after shenanigan and jokes that take a while to hit, but once they hit, they repeat throughout the film, and every time they hit extremely well, whether it be falling in a hole or being chased around by hundreds of beavers or hundreds of rabbits or hundreds of whatever these guys are dressed up as in the moment. And I'm watching this, I'm like, man, this is kind of what movies were always meant to be: fun, ridiculous. It's not going to harm anyone. If you don't like this type of thing, you don't have to watch it. I think an argument could be made to where it's like, yeah, this film lasts a bit too long because it's like the same shtick over and over, but they always found a way to make the joke funny. They always found a way to keep me invested in this utterly ridiculous story of this guy, yet I was always invested. And I will say, Hundreds of Beavers is a damn great time. Damn. You know, like a beaver? I got my Letterboxd to thank for that one. And for watching this movie in the first place. Thanks, Letterboxd crew. You know who you are. Then we have the greatest hits starring Lucy Boynton, who is always amazing. I first saw her in Sing Street, and I've never been able to forget that movie. or her character, and she's awesome every time I see her. And so once again, playing a co-lead, but in this case, a lead role where you are following her around, and every time she hears a song that reminds her of her boyfriend Max, she's transported back, travels through time to that moment, and does everything she can to try to change the outcome of what happens to him. But then she learns that sometimes it's okay to move on, or is it? And so her life, she is in a pickle at this moment. She's trying to figure out, she's being pulled one way by Justin H. Min's David, who's an outstanding character. I loved his charm, the simplicity behind why he shows up in the first place, but absolutely outstandingly played by him. And then Superman, David Cornsweet, who plays Max. And every time you see Max on screen, that smile just shines through the screen. And you really understand why Harriet is having a hard time of letting him go. And so the way they utilize music in this movie was really interesting, in the whole time travel concept. And is she just imagining this, or is she actually going back into time? I love the way they explored that. But really, it's the characters and the relationships and the idea of grief and what it means to move on, and other people in her life encouraging her to move on. And I just really liked it. I know there are some things about the time travel itself that I could question, and some moments where characters make decisions and I'm like, they could have done something else and it probably would have been more realistic. But I really enjoyed how this movie played out, and it's not often that you get a romantic comedy with a spin like this that works so well. I think of a movie like About Time, and that's one of my favorites. This isn't quite on that level, but I may be in the minority here. I saw some solid praise for this film, but nobody's sitting here and telling me it's great. I don't know if it's the greatest romantic comedy I've ever seen, but in a landscape of desolate and kind of boring rom-coms, I found this one to be distinct and interesting. And yeah, I guess the movie is tropey, like it falls into multiple cliches, which is what keeps it from being great. But I'm going the greatest hits on the good tier. I thoroughly enjoyed this one.
This is the story of Alejandro. His mother gave him everything.
How about Problemista, an A24 movie starring Julio Torres and Tilda Swinton? I saw the trailer for this like a year ago, and I thought, this looks creative and interesting and kind of like The Devil Wears Prada, but more A24-ish. Alejandro's work visa is running out, and his only hope to stay in the country and realize his dream as an aspiring toy designer is an erratic and kind of crazy, over-the-top Tilda Swinton. And oh my God, this role was made for Tilda Swinton.
It was perfect.
She's an outcast in the world of art. He is doing whatever it takes. He will do anything it takes to reach his dream, get his visa back. And this journey is one that is told. I think it's the storytelling here that captured me more than the story actually did, because we've seen this type of story before. I really enjoyed spending time with our main character, and as long as Tilda Swinton's on screen in this film, I'm satisfied and I'm entertained. I do wish the story itself would have pulled me in more and said, all right, you're going to be locked in from start to finish. But again, it's the way that they tell it. It's the editing, it's the music, it's some of that cinematography, and you see it highlighted in the trailer. This is just not your typical movie about this. It's more than that, and a lot of that has to do with the performances, but really the direction. And that's why Torres is literally the star here, but also the director, and you can see that shine through. And so I'm excited to see what he does next. This movie is good. It's entertaining, it's artistic, it's a little over the top, and so I'm going good tier. Again, we're keeping April going, man.
This was never a great city, but it was ours.
Are you with me? Always.
Until Hilda Vanderkoy took it from us.
How about Boy Kills World, starring Bill Skarsgård and H. John Benjamin as the voice of Bill Skarsgård? And if you've ever seen any animated show, ever, of all time, you know his voice. You recognize it in the trailer. And I thought it was really interesting, because you're watching that trailer, you're hearing that voice, you're seeing where the origin of that voice comes from, because he obviously can't speak. And that's a fascinating concept to mix with this crazy world that they're living in, and a world that's, or really an area that's been overtaken by some very evil people. You see that on display at the beginning of the movie. And then it turns into John Wick, a full-on revenge tale, because his childhood was traumatic, and ever since he was a boy, he's been training to get back at these evil people. Well, Famke Janssen, a.k.a. Jean Grey, Jessica Roth's in this movie, Charlton Copley, Brett Gelman, all playing despicable and horrible people that are just running this place ruthlessly, and they just take a gun out and fire at will. Whose will, you ask? Anyone. And so the story of this young deaf-mute boy who escapes the jungle and becomes an instrument of death is a really cool story on paper. Now, I will say this. I wasn't as into it as I wanted to be based on that trailer. I wasn't as connected to both the good and the bad characters because the evil people in this movie are so evil and despicable. It's just anytime they're on screen, I'm like, I want you to go and I want you to kill them. But for the first 45 minutes, he doesn't because he has to kind of stand back and watch, which is horrible. But then once he is unleashed, and there's one particular sequence that is absolutely insane, and you see everything you wanted to see from this movie in that moment, in that series of scenes, that was awesome. I was on board. It just takes a while to get there. And a similar complaint to what I saw a lot of people have with Monkey Man. It's like, it's a lot of build-up, and eventually you get the payoff. I was just way more invested in that story than I was this story. Some things about the people surrounding our main character that I just wasn't fully in on. And then I do wish we would have had more revolving him. We get that story at the beginning, but beyond that, he's just kind of lingering in the background for the rest of the film. And so, yeah, we have the first disappointing one of the month that we're talking about. I'm putting Boy Kills World on the meh tier.
Gus March Phillips, I have a mission I want you to lead. Thank you, Sergeant.
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Alan Ritchson and Henry Cavill are the most badass people I've ever seen in my life. Badass. Thought Henry Cavill was huge. Dude, Alan Ritchson in this movie, I said it in my review, you've got our former Superman and maybe our future Batman on screen together. It's awesome. What are they doing? They're killing Nazis in this movie, and that's pretty much the crux of the film. It tries to be Inglourious Bastards, and the half of the movie that they are at the forefront was like perfection because it wasn't trying to do too much, even though they're going for that Inglourious Bastards flair. But then you have the other 50% that was somewhat exciting, but they're not there. And so you have other characters that you have to get to know and you have to care about, and will they, won't they, are they, aren't they going to snap at any moment? And it's just like, yeah, I mean, the villain was good. Til Schweiger is menacing, like always. Isaac Gonzalez, really good, but there was something about her character that I couldn't quite connect to, and every time she's on screen and this storyline's happening, I'm like, let's go back to the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And I know it all comes together beautifully at the end, but I wish they could have moved through that a little quicker. And so, yeah, this could have been a turn-off-your-brain banger. It fell just short of that because it tried a little bit too hard. I wish it wouldn't have, but I'm still going to go good tier for Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Do you remember me? Do you even know my mother's name?
Dev Patel, Monkey Man. I told my friend, I'm like, man, have you seen Monkey Man in theaters? And obviously he hadn't seen the trailer because he was like, what is that?
What? No.
And I wanted to make that John Wick comparison so bad, but I remember back in the day I said the same thing about Pig. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like John Wick in the story, just no action. And the person who saw that was pissed at me because they were like, Austin, that was nothing like John Wick. And I'm like, yeah, well, I said no action. Monkey Man's kind of like that, except once we get the action, it's amazing. It's awesome. You could tell that there was a low budget here, but they did everything they could to make it look cool. And I'm not even sure that some of the choreography was the best I've ever seen, but they made it look cool. And admittedly, there were times where, yes, the shaky cam got in the way of me enjoying a sequence like that just a bit more, but I can kind of forgive that. Yeah, I think there was too much shaky cam in this movie, but I still really liked the action sequences and the payoff, the hero's journey that our character goes on, and this quest for revenge that we just talked about. But in this movie, it works a lot better because you're in it with the character, you feel the payoff at the end, and I really wanted him to succeed because you buy that backstory and the flashbacks throughout the film, they make you root for him that much more. And so I thought this was a great character piece, one, and then two, a fun action movie. A fun action movie that when you get the action, it is worth it. But again, don't expect it to be full John Wick from start to finish because it is not that. It's just a really nice, artistic revenge tale that Dev Patel, you could tell, put a lot of passion into. And so because of all of those things, I'm going to put Monkey Man on the great tier. I thoroughly enjoyed it. about Abigail? This cast is amazing, but Alicia Weir, this young girl who I didn't see the Netflix Matilda movie, so I didn't know what she was all about. Now I'm like, put her in everything, because she had to play two different characters here. One, an innocent little girl who's kidnapped by a horrible group of people, even though you kind of find yourself rooting for a few of them at the end. And so that's the sign of well-written characters. But two, she's a vampire, and that's not a spoiler because it's in every trailer and every piece of marketing, but I kind of wish I didn't know that. At the same time, there was really no other way for them to sell the movie, so they did the right thing, so I can't be too mad. But my God, those scenes are fun. Now, I will say, it does kind of fall into those conventions. What do I mean by that? Well, in the third act, it's a little silly all throughout the film, but in the final few scenes, it gets overly silly, and they turn Dan Stevens into a bit of a cartoon character, and that just doesn't match up with the rest of the bloody, hard R. And when I say bloody, I mean there's so much blood in this movie. So if you like that kind of thing, if you like vampire thrillers, you're going to really like this payoff. But the first 45 minutes, there's none of that. It's just kind of build up. They're leading you to believe one thing, even though you know the twist. The trailers gave you the twist. And so you're aware of what the characters aren't aware of. That makes it a little less thrilling, or at least it did for me. But once you start to get that payoff, it is a blast. I mean, genuinely a blast. I think Weir is fantastic, but the rest of the cast, I mean, Barrera is great, Catherine Newton, Kevin Durand, Giancarlo Esposito's character, didn't love the writing there, but he's great as always, and same with Dan Stevens. That said, Abigail is fun, and it's exactly what you're looking for based on the trailers, and that's why I'm going good tier for Abigail. Man, look at this month.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising.
Civil War. Yeah, there's a big debate online surrounding this film. A lot of people are like, why didn't he lean one way politically, even though part of me thinks he kind of did, but he didn't do it in a super obvious way. And then the other side's just like, guys, enjoy the film for what he's trying to do, placing you in the midst of this madness. And that's exactly what he does. Does it really matter when you're in the middle of a war like this, who's on what side? No, it doesn't, because people are just firing away and they don't care. They don't care who you are or where you come from. Well, I guess some of them do. Jesse Plemons' character does. And I can see both sides. I understand why some people wanted a little more of the political side of things in a Civil War movie, because you're wondering, how did America get in this pickle in the first place? And I don't know. Let's just wait and see, man. This election year, right? How in the world is Texas and California working together? Well, the movie does acknowledge that. I'm glad it did too, because I saw that in the trailer and I said, that makes no sense.
That doesn't make no sense.
Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, Kaylee Spaney. My God, everyone's fantastic in this film. Spaney may have stolen the show. They're traveling across the country as journalists to try to interview the president, but their goal is to get the best shot possible. So think the most badass photographer you could ever imagine, because they're out there in front of these bullets just like all of the soldiers are. So they're essentially soldiers. They're just trying to get the shot, and they're trying not to get shot. Boo! Look, you may have seen the trailer and said, why isn't Nick Offerman in this movie more? Or why didn't they go into more detail as to why they are there? But again, it's one of those films that literally drops you in the middle of this battlefield, and you are there, and you are in it on the edge of your seat. At least I was, with these characters. And even the more quiet and subtle moments, or the places that they go to that are way more calm than the last place that they were at, it's an intense movie from start to finish, and you can just feel the tension. Look at Kirsten Dunst's face throughout this entire movie. You can feel her pain, that she's seen things, she's been there, she's done that, and everyone's just sick of this war that America is in the middle of. And so I found that to be fascinating. They handled it in a great way. Jesse Plemons' scene is still one of the best and most tense scenes of the entire movie. The way it's enhanced by the sound design is incredible. And then the way this movie ends. And some people, again, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like the lack of this or that in the film, but I looked at it more of what they intended to give us rather than what maybe some people wanted or expected out of the movie. And what I got was an incredibly intense time in the theater, and one that I really heavily responded to. And so I'm going to put Civil War. Man, it's close. It's, yeah, let's do it. Let's go awesome tier.
Guess who?
the Woodpecker goes to camp, or is in camp, or there's some kind of camp. It's a fun summer camp. And the forest people, they're like, hey, Woody, we don't want you anymore. And he goes to this summer camp, and he thinks he's found a home. But then the inspector comes in, they're like, Woody the Woodpecker, you're annoying. And I loved Woody the Woodpecker as a kid. And was he always like this? And I don't think it's even him. I think it's just this movie and the way it's made and the way that kids, poor kids. Do you want to torture your kids? No, it's not that bad. It's fine. It's cute. It's just not for me, man. I'm going to acknowledge that it is a movie for kids, but it's got to be the most annoying movie I've seen in like a year. I was so annoyed the entire time. And again, Woody the Woodpecker, learning some lessons. There's some fun to be had. There's some silly antics. It's just like, it's so grating. Got some great voice actors in here. Kevin Michael Richardson, Tom Kenny as Wally Walrus, but they come in and the way that they mix the cartoon world with the human world here and how it's like that heightened reality type of things. It reminds me of what they did with the Yogi Bear live action movie or the later Alvin and the Chipmunks films. I will defend the first one. The first one is charming. This was not that. This was not that. At least for me, it's not that. And so can't put it on the awful tier. I think some kids are going to respond to it, but I will not be showing my daughter bad tier. Rebel Moon Part 2. Yeah. This is not it. And I have defended Zack Snyder. I have came on this channel and said, how dare you question Army of the Dead? That movie was fun. I get it. It's got its issues, but it was a fun film.
Are you sure about that?
There's no defending Rebel Moon. I'm seeing people trying to do it on Twitter, and they're like getting onto people because it's like, guys, it's not that bad. You're just doing it because you hate Zack Snyder. Look, I am a Snyder fan, even a Snyder stan, but I can't defend Space Farmer the movie. I just can't do it. I even after doing my review, I thought about it more, and I'm like, that's worse. That is worse than I initially thought it was, because I expected Part 2 to not only pay off and deliver on what we got from Part 1, but also improve on the mistakes, right? I know they filmed it back to back, but they had some more time to go into the editing and change some things, and I know they're going to do that for the director's cut. Why are we doing a director's cut? People are like, Austin, just go watch the director's cut when that comes out. That's going to be better, obviously. Maybe. I love Zack Snyder's director's cuts. But why are they still doing this? Why don't they let him release the movie he wants to release? Why is this a thing? I thought that's why we signed on with Netflix, to not do this anymore. And they're still doing it. Why are they doing it?
Why?
Even then, why release a cut this bad? There are clips going around on Twitter that I'll rewatch and I'm like, was it that bad? The guy that says, come on, do it, kill him. I think I like Sofia Boutella's character a little more in this movie. Everyone else, less. I did not care. I could have cared less. Some nice action sequences, but again, as somebody calculated it, there's like 25 minutes of slow-mo in this movie. It's one of those things that you use sparingly, because when you use it sparingly and use it at the right moments, it is then effective. This was not effective in this film. I know I seem angry, but that's mostly because I really did expected Part 1 to be great. I love the trailer. Thought it was awesome. It looked like that dark and gritty Star Wars that I expected it to be. And then it's like, okay, Part 2, can you improve upon the mistakes? No. I'm putting it on the bad tier because there were some moments, but I get people saying awful. I get it.
You think that tennis is about expressing yourself, doing your thing. You don't know what tennis is.
What is it?
Let's snap back to reality really quick and talk about a movie that I thought was absolutely phenomenal, and that is Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, who made this story. If it was handled in any other way, I would have found this to be the most dull and uninteresting story I've ever seen. But it wasn't that. I was fascinated by these characters. I was invested in their story. I cared about their relationships, even though they're not the best people in the world, all three of them. And I saw some people say, well, Austin, I didn't really have a character to root for, so I didn't like the movie. I get that, but I don't have to have that in every movie. This film is clearly telling us that these are people, these are characters that make mistakes, and they pay for it in this film all throughout the movie. And so I like the humanity of it all. None of us are perfect. None of us are always the protagonist in our own story. There are times when I do things that I regret. Other people do things that they regret. And if they tell you otherwise, they're liars. They're compulsive liars. So don't listen to them.
I ain't calling you a truther.
I still understand the argument of I couldn't root for anyone in this movie because it's a legitimate argument, but I was fine with it. I liked the story that was being told. I was into it. I was interested. The performances by Feist and O'Connor and Zendaya are magnificent. Oscar-worthy, spectacular synonyms. But even performances this good and a romantic triangle that is so interesting, that's not what makes the movie what it is. It's the style, it's the editing, it's the Reznor-Ross score. My God, I will levitate. It's the cinematography, the camera angles. You can say it's doing too much. I will push back and say, whatever, dude. Whatever. And look, I've seen movies like this before that have a lot of style and they try really hard and you get all those funky camera angles and then I just don't care about the story. And so that's the case where it's like, whatever. In this case, I cared. I thought it was awesome. I was invested from start to finish. It had a style to it. It's what I've always wanted a Guadagnino movie to be, and I've loved some of his films, but I've also thought a few were overrated. This is the pinnacle of Luca Guadagnino to me, and it's the most crowd-friendly. Maybe that's why I like it. I'm a simpleton at my core. What can I say? I thought this movie was magnificent. I'm putting it on the awesome tier. What a list. What a month. Let's rank it. If you're still here, dropping that like would be awesome and let me know what movie did I miss in April. At the bottom, Rebel Moon, you lucked out, pal. Woody the Woodpecker. Why did I watch that movie? Rebel Moon and then followed by Boy Kills World. And now we're going all the way to the good tier. No okay movies in April. We're going up. We're going to start with Abigail and then Problemista, followed by, let's go the First Omen. This is a little tougher, but I'm going to keep Ungentlemanly Warfare there and put the greatest hits at the 5 spot. At number 4, I think I enjoyed Monkey Man just slightly more than Hundreds of Beavers. At the 2 spot, Civil War, because Challengers is not only my number 1 of April. I will be really surprised if it's not my top 10 at the end of the year. If it's not in my top 5, we've had an awesome year because there were 5 movies that pushed it out. At a point in my head, I'm like, is this better than Dune 2? I mean, in my heart, I know it's not, but is it? Is it? Look, I love sports, but I don't love tennis, so this movie made me want to go play a lot of pickleball. Because I'm not good at tennis. But I am pretty good at pickleball. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you guys big time. Come back because we have a jam-packed May. My goodness. Tomorrow, The Fall Guy. Next week,
Apes together, strong.